Can a man imprisoned for a crime he didn't fully commit find redemption in the arms of an Irish widow, fleeing famine and heartbreak when two broken souls meet through a mail-order bride advertisement in 1870s California? They discover that sometimes the greatest love grows from the deepest pain. Hit that like button and subscribe for this powerful story of second chances, forgiveness, and the courage to trust again. Ex-convict's mail-order bride is Irish widow with nothing left but together they build everything. The letter trembled in Declan Murphy's calloused hands as he read it for the 10th time. After 3 months of waiting, someone had finally answered his advertisement. And not just anyone, but a woman who seemed to understand what it meant to need a second chance. Dear Mr. Murphy, the letter began in careful script. My name is Siobhan O'Brien Lately of County Cork, Ireland. I am a widow of 27 years recently arrived in New York with nothing to my name save determination and a willingness to work. Your advertisement spoke of needing someone patient and understanding. I offer both along with strong hands and a stronger spirit. Declan sat on the porch of his half-built cabin looking out over the 40 acres of California land he'd claimed after his release from San Quentin. 5 years. He'd served him for 5 years for a crime that had been part necessity, part accident, and entirely life-destroying. Now at 32, he was trying to build something from nothing. A ranch, a life, a future that didn't include the shadow of iron bars. The advertisement had been an act of desperate hope. Man with past seeks woman with patience. Have land and ambition. Need partner for ranch and life. Must be willing to see beyond yesterday to tomorrow. He'd been honest about having a past, though not specific about what it entailed. Most women would run when they learned the truth. But Siobhan's letter suggested she had her own shadows to outrun. I do not seek love, she had written, for I have buried that with my husband and child in Irish soil. But I seek purpose, partnership, and perhaps in time peace. If you can offer these things, I can offer loyalty, hard work, and companionship without judgment. A husband and child both gone. Declan understood that kind of loss, though his was different. The loss of who he'd been before that night when everything went wrong. He wrote back immediately, sending money for her passage to California. It would take most of his savings, but what good was money without someone to share the burden and the dream? 6 weeks later, Declan stood at the Sacramento station hat in hand, watching passengers disembark from the Transcontinental Railroad. He'd bathed, shaved, put on his cleanest shirt, trying to look respectable, though he felt the stares of those who recognized him. The story had been in all the papers during the trial. Even 5 years later, some remembered. Then he saw her. There was no mistaking Siobhan O'Brien. She carried herself like someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. Red hair pulled back severely, green eyes that held depths of sorrow, a worn brown dress that had been mended multiple times but kept clean. She was thin, too thin, with the hollow look of someone who'd known true hunger. Their eyes met across the platform, and Declan saw the moment of recognition followed by assessment. He knew what she saw. A tall man made lean by prison, dark hair, touched early with gray-blue eyes that couldn't quite hide the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust. His left hand bore scars from prison labor, and he stood slightly favoring his right leg, broken during a fight he hadn't started but had been forced to finish. Mr. Murphy, her voice carried the musical lilt of Ireland, though roughened by hardship. Mrs. O'Brien, welcome to California. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You're honest, at least. Your letter said you had a past. I can see it in your eyes. Does it frighten you? Everything frightens me, Mr. Murphy. I've learned to walk forward anyway. It was the most honest greeting he could have hoped for. The ride to his land took 3 hours by wagon. Siobhan sat beside him, taking in the California landscape, so different from Ireland's green hills. It's very brown, she observed. It's summer. Come winter, after the rains, it turns green. Different from Ireland's green, but green nonetheless. You've been to Ireland? No, but I've known Irishmen, plenty in... He stopped. In prison? She supplied calmly. You might as well say it. We'll be married after all. Secrets make poor foundations. Declan glanced at her, surprised by her directness. Yes, in prison. 5 years in San Quentin. For what? Robbery or attempted robbery. It went wrong. He waited for her to demand he turn the wagon around, take her back to the station. Instead, she asked, did you do it? I was there. I held the gun. But I didn't shoot anyone. That was Jake Thornton, my partner. He's dead now, hung for murder. I got 5 years as an accomplice. Why did you do it? It was a question no one had asked during the trial. They had all assumed greed. My sister was dying, consumption. There was a doctor in San Francisco who said he could help, but it cost more money than I'd see in a lifetime of honest work. So I made a dishonest choice. Did she live? No, she died while I was awaiting trial. Never even knew I'd been arrested. They rode in silence for a while, then Siobhan spoke. My husband died of fever. My son Colum died 2 days later. He was 3. I sold everything to bury them properly, then used the last coins to buy passage to America. I thought I was coming to opportunity. Instead, I found only closed doors and men who thought a widow alone meant availability. Is that why you answered my advertisement? Partly, but also because you asked for patience and understanding, not beauty or youth or dowry. Those are the words of someone who knows what it means to need grace. They crested a hill, and Declan's land spread before them. 40 acres of grassland with a creek running through it. Redemption Creek, he'd named it, though he hadn't told anyone that. A half-finished cabin sat near the water, along with a small barn and the beginning of fence lines. It's not much, he said, suddenly aware of how modest it must look to someone who'd traveled 3,000 miles to see it. It's possibility, Siobhan said softly. That's more than I had in New York. The cabin had 2 rooms, one main room with a stone and table, one smaller room with a bed. You'll take the bedroom, Declan said. I'll sleep in the barn until we decide on arrangements. We should marry soon, Siobhan said practically, for propriety if nothing else. Tomorrow, if you're willing, there's a justice of the peace in town. I'm willing. That evening, Declan prepared a simple meal. Beans, cornbread, preserved peaches he'd bought in anticipation of her arrival. Siobhan ate slowly, as if relearning the act of having enough food. Tell me about the ranch, she said. What are your plans? Cattle primarily, maybe some horses. The land's good for grazing and the creek means water year-round. I've saved enough for a small starter herd. You'll need help. I was hoping, that is, if you're willing. Mr. Murphy, Declan. I didn't come 3,000 miles to sit idle. I can work cattle. We had them in Cork before the famine. I can mend fence, tend garden, whatever needs doing. It'll be hard work. Hard work is living. Sitting still is dying. She looked at him directly. I've done enough dying. I'm ready to live again, even if I don't quite remember how. That night, Declan lay in the barn staring at the stars through gaps in the roof. Inside the cabin, he could hear Siobhan moving about, settling in. It was strange having another person on his land after so much solitude. Strange but not unwelcome. The next morning they rode to town. Declan had warned her about the reception they might receive. People know about my past. They might not be welcoming. Then we match, don't we? Siobhan had replied, pinning her hair up. An ex-convict in a famine Irish. We're what America is made of, whether they like it or not. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by the justice's wife and his clerk. When it came time to kiss the bride, Declan leaned in carefully, barely brushing Siobhan's lips. She smelled of lavender soap, and her lips were softer than he'd expected. Well then, she said softly as they parted. We're married. We are. They stopped at the general store on the way home. Mr. Henderson, the proprietor, looked surprised to see Declan with a woman. This is my wife, Siobhan. Declan said the words, feeling foreign but not unpleasant. Henderson's expression went through several changes before settling on cautious politeness. Mrs. Murphy, welcome to Cedar Valley. Siobhan nodded regally, as if she were a queen greeting subjects rather than a penniless immigrant facing suspicious scrutiny. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'll be requiring supplies for a proper garden. Perhaps you could recommend what grows well here. Her dignity in the face of barely concealed hostility made Declan stand taller. This woman, his wife, had steel in her spine. Over the following weeks, they developed a rhythm. Declan worked on fencing while Siobhan established her garden. She had a gift with growing things, coaxing life from the California soil with the same determination she applied to everything. Evenings they ate together, gradually sharing more of their stories. Declan told her about growing up poor in Missouri, losing his parents young, raising his sister alone. Siobhan spoke of Ireland before the famine, when there was laughter and music before the potatoes turned black and the world ended. Do you miss it? Declan asked one evening. I miss who I was there, Siobhan replied. But that woman is gone, buried with her son. Maybe she's not buried, maybe she's just sleeping. Siobhan looked at him across the table, candlelight softening her features. Maybe. Do you think we can wake the people we used to be? I don't know, but maybe we can become new people, better people. Built on the foundations of who we were, built on the ruins, Declan corrected. Sometimes ruins make the strongest foundations. A month into their marriage, trouble arrived in the form of Jake Thornton's brother Will. Declan was mending fence when he saw the rider approaching. He recognized the Thornton swagger even before he saw the face. Murphy, Will Thornton called out, not dismounting. Heard you got yourself a wife. What do you want, Will? Just paying a social call. Jake always said you had the money hidden somewhere. Figured now that you're playing house might be time to share. There's no money. Never was. Jake said different before he hung. Jake lied about a lot of things, including who pulled that trigger. Will's hand moved toward his gun. You calling my brother a liar? I'm stating facts. The moment stretched taut. Then Siobhan appeared carrying Declan's rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who knew how to use it. You'll be leaving now, she said calmly to Will, and you'll not be coming back. Will looked between them, calculating odds. This isn't over, Murphy. It's been over for 5 years, Declan replied. Your brother's dead. I've paid my debt. Leave us be. After Will rode off, Siobhan lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking. Thank you, Declan said. We're married. Your troubles are mine now. You didn't sign up for this kind of trouble. Didn't I? She looked at him with those green eyes that had seen too much. I knew what you were when I came, a man with a past. But you're also a man trying to build a future. That's worth defending. The first test of their partnership came with the autumn rains. The creek rose higher than Declan had expected, threatening to flood the cabin. Together they worked through the night, digging drainage channels, building barriers. Siobhan's skirts were soaked and muddy, her hands raw from shoveling, but she never complained. When dawn broke and the water receded, they stood exhausted but victorious. We did it, Siobhan said, a rare smile breaking across her face. We did. Declan agreed and impulsively pulled her into a hug. They both froze, suddenly aware of the intimacy. They'd been married 2 months but had maintained careful physical distance, now pressed against each other, soaked and muddy and triumphant. Something shifted. Siobhan pulled back first. We should get dry clothes. Yes, Declan agreed, but neither moved for a moment. That night, the sleeping arrangements changed. The barn roof had been damaged in the storm. You can't sleep in there, Siobhan said. You'll take fever. The floor by the stove is fine. Declan, she rarely used his first name. We're married, we're partners. The bed is large enough for 2 if we're careful. They lay side by side that night, careful not to touch, but aware of each other's every breath. Declan hadn't shared a bed with anyone since before prison. The warmth of another human nearby was both comforting and terrifying. Are you awake? Siobhan whispered in the darkness. Yes. I haven't slept beside anyone since Thomas died. Your husband? Yes, he was a good man, gentle, nothing like... She paused. Nothing like me. I was going to say nothing like the harshness of this world. But you're not harsh, Declan. You're just careful. Prison teaches caution. So does loss. They lay in silence, then Siobhan's hand found his across the space between them. Just fingertips touching, but it felt like a bridge between 2 islands. Winter brought unexpected prosperity. The cattle Declan had bought thrived on the good grazing land. Siobhan's garden had produced enough to sell vegetables in town, earning them extra money. They bought more stock, expanded the cabin, even added glass windows, a luxury Declan hadn't dared dream of. But prosperity brought attention. Will Thornton returned this time with 2 other men. You're doing well for a convict, Will observed, watching Declan load supplies onto the wagon in town. Hard work pays. So does crime if you do it right. Jake just partnered with the wrong man. Your brother partnered with desperation and whiskey. Both make poor advisors. You think you're better than us now? With your little Irish wife and your little ranch. Siobhan emerged from the general store. The only little thing here is your character, Mr. Thornton. Now move along before the sheriff takes interest." Will laughed unpleasantly. "Sheriff Brennan, he's more interested in the bottom of a bottle than enforcing law." It was true. Sheriff Brennan was rarely sober past noon, but Will and his companions left anyway, though their parting looks promised future trouble. That evening, Declan made a decision. "I'm teaching you to shoot. Properly." Siobhan had handled the rifle competently, but Declan wanted her prepared for real trouble. They spent hours practicing Declan standing behind her, adjusting her stance, his hands over hers on the weapon. The closeness was necessary for instruction, but it was also becoming something else. An excuse to touch to be near. "You're a quick learner," he said as she hit the target dead center. "I have a good teacher." She turned in his arms, the rifle lowered. They were very close, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Siobhan, I know we agreed this was a business arrangement," she said softly, "but arrangements can change. You said you'd buried your heart with your family." "I did, but hearts like seeds sometimes sprout again in new soil." He kissed her, then really kissed her, not the brief brush of their wedding, but something deeper, hungrier. She responded, her arms coming around his neck, the rifle forgotten. When they parted, both breathing hard, Siobhan smiled. "Well then, is this what you want?" Declan asked. I can't promise to be an easy man to love. I'm not an easy woman to love either, but maybe two difficult people can find something simple together." That night, they became husband and wife in truth as well as law. It was tender and desperate in equal measure, two people relearning what it meant to be vulnerable with another human being. Afterward, Siobhan traced the scars on Declan's back, marks from a guard's whip in prison. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore. Not with you here." She told him about the crossing from Ireland, the ship's dark hold where people died daily, where she'd held a stranger's baby, while the mother passed singing Irish lullabies to calm the child's cries. "You're stronger than you know," Declan said. "We're both stronger than we knew. Maybe that's why we found each other." Spring brought new life in multiple ways. The ranch had its first calves. The garden burst with growth, and Siobhan realized she was pregnant. She told Declan on a morning when the wildflowers had turned the hills purple and gold. "Are you certain?" "I am. Are you happy?" Declan pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a child, a real life. Yet I'm happy. Terrified, but happy." "I'm terrified too," Siobhan admitted. "After losing Colum, I swore I'd never. But here we are. Here we are." They stood together, looking out over their land, no longer his land but theirs, and allowed themselves to hope. But hope in the frontier was always fragile. Will Thornton hadn't forgotten his grudge. He'd been planning waiting, and now he struck. Declan had gone to town for supplies, leaving Siobhan at the ranch. She was working in the garden when she heard horses. Three men, Will in the lead. "Mrs. Murphy," Will said with mock courtesy. "Where's your husband?" "Not here." "Perfect, we'll wait inside." "You'll wait nowhere. Get off our land." Will dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. "You know, Jake told me something interesting before he died. Said Murphy had hidden gold from a job they did before the bank. Said he was saving it for his sick sister." "There's no gold." "Maybe, maybe not, but you're going to help us look." Siobhan's hand went to her stomach protectively. "I'll do no such thing." Will noticed the gesture, his smile widening. "Well now, Murphy's got himself a family started. How nice, be a shame if something happened." The threat was clear. Siobhan's mind raced, calculating options. The rifle was inside too far, but the pistol Declan had given her was in her apron pocket. "There's nothing here but what we've built with honest work," she said, her hand sliding toward the pocket. "Honest work," Will scoffed. "From a convict and immigrant trash." The insult to Declan sparked something fierce in Siobhan. She drew the pistol smoothly, just as Declan had taught her. "Leave now." Will and his men froze. They hadn't expected the Irish widow to be armed and dangerous. "You won't shoot," Will said, but uncertainty colored his voice. "Won't I? I've buried a husband and child. I've survived famine and crossing an ocean in a coffin ship. I've married an ex-convict and made a life from nothing. You think I won't protect what's mine?" The standoff might have ended badly, but the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted. Declan appeared riding hard rifle already in hand. He'd seen the strange horses from the road. "Step away from my wife," he said, his voice deadly calm. Will and his men were outnumbered now, and Siobhan had proved she wasn't helpless. They backed toward their horses. "This isn't over," Will said. "Yes, it is," Declan replied. "You come here again, they'll find you in the creek. That's not a threat, it's a promise." After they left, Declan pulled Siobhan into his arms. "Are you hurt?" "No, but Declan, they'll be back. Men like that don't give up." "Then we'll be ready." But Siobhan had a different idea. That evening, she proposed a solution that surprised him. "We need allies. The other ranchers, the townspeople. We've been keeping to ourselves, but that makes us vulnerable. They don't trust me. Ex-convict, remember. Then we make them trust us. We help when needed, join the church, become part of the community instead of apart from it." It went against Declan's instinct to keep his head down, but he saw the wisdom in her words. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The Martinez family's barn caught fire in the night. Declan and Siobhan saw the flames from their cabin and rode to help without hesitation. They worked alongside other neighbors through the night, saving what they could. "Gracias," Senor Martinez said afterward, gripping Declan's hand. "You are good neighbors." It was a start. Over the following weeks, Siobhan made a point of attending church, joining the ladies' sewing circle, bringing vegetables from her garden to share. Declan helped other ranchers with difficult work, never asking for payment, only for the same help when he needed it. Slowly, the community's perception shifted. The ex-convict and the Irish widow became Declan and Siobhan Murphy. Good neighbors, hard workers, expectant parents. When Will Thornton returned with 5 men this time, intending to take by force what he couldn't find by stealth, he found more than he bargained for. Declan and Siobhan weren't alone. Word had spread through the valley that trouble was coming. 7 neighboring ranchers were waiting with them rifles ready. "Seems you've made friends, Murphy," Will said, his bravado diminished. "Seems you've overstayed your welcome in this valley," Sheriff Brennan said, stepping forward. He was sober for once, badge shining. "I've been looking into you, Thornton. Wanted in Nevada for cattle rustling. These good folks here are witnesses to you threatening the Murphys." Will looked around at the assembled crowd. Mexican ranchers, German farmers, American cowboys, and, in the center, an Irish immigrant and an ex-convict no longer alone. "This isn't worth it," one of Will's men muttered. Will's face contorted with rage, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "You win this round, Murphy." "I win every round," Declan replied. "I have something to protect now." Will and his men left the valley that day and didn't return. Weeks later, news came that Will had been shot in a card game in Nevada. The last ghost of Declan's past was laid to rest. Summer brought the birth of their daughter, whom they named Grace. "For the grace we've both been given," Siobhan explained, holding the tiny bundle. Declan, who'd thought himself too damaged for such tenderness, found himself weeping as he held his child for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's hope," Siobhan corrected. "Our hope made flesh." The ranch prospered. They bought adjacent land, hired help, built a larger house. But they kept the original cabin a reminder of where they'd started. 5 years passed. Grace grew strong and wild with her mother's red hair and her father's blue eyes. A son followed named Thomas for Siobhan's first husband, a gesture that touched Declan deeply. "You don't mind?" Siobhan had asked. "He was part of who you are. Without him, without that loss, you might never have come to California. We honor the past even as we build the future." One autumn evening, they sat on the porch watching their children play by Redemption Creek. The ranch spread before them, 300 acres now, with 100 head of cattle and a dozen horses. "Did you imagine this?" Siobhan asked. "When you placed that advertisement in—" "I imagined survival. This is so much more. When I answered, I was just trying to escape New York. I never imagined I'd find home." "Is that what this is? Home?" Siobhan took his hand, worn and calloused from shared work. "Home is where your ghost can rest, where your heart can heal, where your future grows from seeds planted in sorrow, but watered with hope." Poetry from a rancher's wife. Truth from a woman who's learned the difference between existing and living. That winter, a letter arrived from Ireland. Siobhan's sister, whom she'd thought dead in the famine, had survived and tracked her to California. "She wants to come," Siobhan said, tears streaming down her face. Her husband died. She has 2 children. Then they'll come, Declan said immediately. We have room. You'd do that, take in more Irish refugees. I'd take in anyone you love. Besides, family is family. When Bridget arrived with her children, thin and worn, as Siobhan had been, the circle of redemption widened. The ranch became a haven for those needing second chances. Former convicts, Declan vouched for Irish immigrants with nowhere else to go, anyone willing to work hard and start fresh. You've built something special here, Sheriff Brennan told Declan one day. From a man alone on 40 acres to this. I didn't build it alone. No, that Irish wife of yours is a force of nature. She saved me, Declan said simply. In every way, a person can be saved. 10 years after Siobhan stepped off that train, they renewed their vows in the church they'd helped build. The whole valley attended, testament to how far they'd come from the suspicious reception of that first day. Do you take this man again, knowing all his faults and history? The minister asked with a smile. I take him because of his faults and history, Siobhan replied. They made him who he is, the best man I know. Do you take this woman with her fierce temper and Irish stubbornness? I take her because of those things, Declan said. They brought her to me and kept her fighting when anyone else would have given up. As they kissed their children giggling in the front pew, the congregation erupted in celebration. The ex-convict and the Irish widow had become pillars of the community, proof that redemption was possible, that love could grow from the rockiest soil. That evening, as the party continued at the ranch, Declan and Siobhan slipped away to the original cabin, now used for storage, but still standing strong. Do you remember our first night here? Siobhan asked. You ate so carefully, like you couldn't believe there was enough food. You kept apologizing for everything. The cabin, the land, yourself. We were two broken people trying not to cut each other on our sharp edges. And now we're two healed people who help mend each other. They stood in the doorway looking out at Redemption Creek running clear and strong toward the sea. I never thanked you, Declan said suddenly. For what? For answering that advertisement. For taking a chance on a stranger with a past. I never thanked you either. For placing it. For offering partnership instead of servitude, understanding instead of judgment. We're even then. No, Siobhan said, turning to face him. We're blessed. Years later, when Declan's hair was white and Siobhan's face lined with laughter, they would tell their grandchildren the story. How Grandpa had made a terrible mistake in his youth but paid his debt. How Grandma had crossed an ocean with nothing but hope. How they'd found each other through words on paper and built an empire of love from nothing but determination and trust. Was it hard? Little Mary Grace's daughter asked. Starting over. The hardest thing we ever did, Declan answered. And the best, Siobhan added, because the hardest things often are. When Declan passed first at 73, Siobhan held his hand as he looked out at the land they'd claimed together. No regrets, he whispered. None, she agreed. Jeta, we did it most store. We built heaven from hell. We did. His last words were thank you. Siobhan lived at 5 more years, long enough to see the ranch pass to their children, expanded to 1,000 acres. She was buried beside Declan, overlooking Redemption Creek, their headstone reading, Declan and Siobhan Murphy. They found redemption in each other and built paradise from pain. The ranch remains in the family to this day, and Redemption Creek still runs clear. Sometimes locals say you can see 2 figures walking hand in hand along its banks at sunset. An ex-convict and an Irish widow, proof that love can bloom anywhere, even in the most unlikely soil, when tended with patience, understanding, and the courage to trust again. In the ranch house framed above the fireplace hangs the original advertisement, Man with past seeks woman with patience. Below it, in Siobhan's careful script, she had written, Woman with sorrow found man with hope. Together they discovered joy. And in the end, that's all any love story really is. 2 people choosing to heal together, rather than bleed alone, building something beautiful from the broken pieces of who they used to be.